Hello, I'm John Beattie. Welcome to Cask to Glass, the whisky podcast, where I explore the heritage and flavour of Scotland's national drink and the world's favourite spirit. In this episode, I talked to Brian Taylor, the BBC's former political editor, now newspaper columnist. Brian's a devotee of Robert Burns, and I'm looking to learn more about Burns and his influence on the culture of Scotland and his love of whisky. Brian Taylor, thank you very much for coming in.
Great to see you, John. Great to see you.
It's been a long time. Semi-retired.
Semi.
Both of us.
Quarter retired, yeah.
Let's start. How do you take your whiskey?
I take it with a tiny little bit of water, but you know what? You want to take it with ice, you want to take it with iron brew. You know, I don't think we need to get...
Iron brew?
Well, or another drink. Other drinks are available, other soft drinks are available. I don't think we need to get too precious about it, and I think that's what's happened to whiskey. I think it's modernised a little bit, and so you get some modern whiskies, you get some established whiskies, you get the two. As long as it's available as a drink, and as long as Scotland's doing well from it, that'll do me fine. Personally, I take it single malt, neat, a little bit of water added. Apparently that improves it. I'm told. I don't know the science of it, but apparently it improves.
You and I, the beauty of this is you and I are ex-BBC people, so we can't really have an opinion, and we're quite comfortable not having an opinion. But I love Islay as a place. You know, we go there on holiday a lot, and I just love going to Laphroaig and Lagavulin and Bunnahabhain and all these places and sampling those whiskies.
Yeah.
What ones do you like? You probably can't name them. Which ones do you like?
I don't mind naming them. My two sons, I've got two grown-up sons, and they go for Islay whiskies. One likes Bruichladdich, one likes Lagavulin, and they really like those, that peaty taste. Me, I tend to go more for the classic Speyside malts. But I had a birthday recently, and my two sons, very wisely, each gave me a bottle of whiskey, but they were quite distinctive ones. Yeah. One was, I think I'm not sure what the pronunciation, Nicknean. It's an organic whiskey from the Morvan. Nicknean, NC-Cap-N. It's from a new distillery on the Morvan Peninsula. And so that's a very modern one. And the other son gave me a very ancient name, which was Cadenhead's Ben Nevis. So you got the very modern and the very ancient. I like the story, and both, I'm sure, wonderful whiskies. I haven't had a chance to taste them yet because they're quite newly acquired. But I think the whiskey story I liked was of a guy who was a real expert in the industry. He used to work for Glenfiddich. And the legend is that he was asked, what's your favourite whiskey? And he said, the one that's in my hand. And I think I like that story.
One of the things we love about Islay is if you go and have a look at the distilleries, Lagavulin is in a little bay. Yeah. And you can get a boat trip in. And we went there this summer. I'm diverting you. This summer we went there. And there was a sign up that we misread, which was, otters are fed at 7:30 every morning, right? So we had the whole family from...
Go and see the otters.
Yes, exactly. So we all jump in the car, 7 in the morning. And we drive out there, and then we read the sign.
Dad, I forgot to go. You want to see the otters, don't you?
We read the sign that says, if you're lucky, you may see otters feeding.
The Lagavulin story I like is the comedy Parks and Recreation. A character in that, a guy called Ron Swanson, his name was, and he's a real sort of down-to-earth American. I won't get into more details than that. But he was a big fan of Lagavulin. He was always drinking it in the series in America. They filmed in the UK, and nothing would do. He had to go to Lagavulin, and he was in tears sitting at the distillery drinking it. He was literally in tears, and apparently it was genuine. Apparently, they just recorded and let it go. So I think that's a good indication of the attraction of Scotch.
Our holiday was rain sodden, and it was me, my son.
That's why the whiskey's so good.
My son and I, we went to a tasting, and that rescued the holiday because it was like, let's all have a few whiskies. So you can you remember the first time you had a whiskey? Can you remember how early it would be in your life?
Being aware that some of Her Majesty's finest may be watching, but probably at university in St Andrews, and I remember it being something of a revelation in that it was exceptionally strong but exceptionally tasty as well. And I just like the way whiskey has changed its image. I love the way that they're going for promoting the single malts, and they've made it almost like a club that if I'm a I don't know, Bruichladdich support or whatever, and that's it. Nobody will shift me from that, and somebody else goes for the other ones. The time I think probably had an almost spiritual experience, if you're going to forgive the pun, with whiskey was My nephew works in the industry, and he arranged a tasting. And he got a 40-year-old Aberfeldy, not maybe a particularly well-known malt, but they make Dewars. He got a 40-year-old Aberfeldy, and I was like Ron. I was for any sake, it was just indescribably good. I'm told that some of the really old ones are not necessarily the best, but that 40-year-old Aberfeldy was quite something.
There's a story somebody else told me about a Japanese visitor who went to a whiskey bar, I think maybe even one of the whiskey hotels, and ordered a very old bottle of whiskey and couldn't drink it. Couldn't drink it. It just didn't taste good anymore. I don't know if that's true.
I was in a bar in Tokyo around the corner from my hotel, and there was these Japanese doctors having a night on the Raz, as only I'm sure doctors can. And they were getting that evening a delivery. The proprietor was getting a delivery of, have I got this right, Johnny Walker Blue Label? Is there such a bottle? I think there is. They were getting a delivery of Johnny, and they learned I was from Scotland, and nothing would do but upstairs to share the Blue Label with them. So the long night wore on, as you would say. And they were huge admirers of Scotland, and certainly huge admirers of whiskey.
Yeah, I've been in Tokyo and I've been in China too, in Shanghai, and people keep their own bottle of whiskey behind the bar.
Aye.
In fact, this is my they do, don't they? They leave their bottle of whiskey in the bar and they come back for their whiskey, which I didn't know. And the other thing I remember in Islay, going to a funeral, the McCormicks, Jill's family are friendly with the McCormicks, and it was a farmer's funeral. And this will stick with me all my life, and I get quite emotional talking about my country and this sort of stuff. And we went to the ceremony, and then everyone trudged up the hill to the graveyard. And there's this wind, and the men are in their coats and dark clothes, leaning into the wind, and out came the whiskey.
Oh, wow.
And the cheese and oatcakes.
Oh, wow.
And they buried the man. I think this is a tradition in the Highlands all over. They buried the man, and then they drank whiskey, poured some in the grave, and then drunk whiskey and ate cheese and biscuits. I thought,
goodness me,
it was like something from the 1700s.
Yeah, probably literally. Yeah.
Literally. So whiskey is, in terms of its place in Scotland. What do you think its place is? I think it's part of our worldwide image, isn't it?
I think it's utterly critical part of Scotland. I take quite a strong view on the image, John, because I'll tell you why. I've heard down the years as a journalist, so many people say, "Oh, why doesn't Scotland modernise its image? Why is it and they always say tartan and shortbread. Why is it the tartan and shortbread?" There are nations around the planet who would kill for an image of that nature. The tartan, the whiskey, the folk songs, the golf, the songs, especially the songs. They would kill for that image. So yes, we have that. So I think you hook people in on that image. You want to let's find who your clan is. Your name's whatever. You're a sept of the Clan Cameron, and you come. You're welcome. So it's welcoming rather than exclusive, but it is distinctive as well. And I think whiskey's a part of that. And the reason whiskey has been saved and is tremendously successful in Scotland. Certainly, it's a terrific product. Certainly, it's well marketed. But it's the law. It's because they protect the name. You can't pinch the names like Speyside and Islay and that. These are protected by law, and I reckon that is what makes Scotch whisky what it is. It can be owned by anybody on the planet, but it can only be made in a certain place in a certain way and using certain names, and it's illegal. So there's a legal basis to what is actually a very romantic story, and I think that's quite an interesting blend.
If you're enjoying Cask to Glass, the Whisky Podcast, with me, John Beattie, we'd love you to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and follow us on socials at C2G Whisky. That's the letter C, numeral 2, letter G, followed by the word whiskey. And please keep on listening. We'll come back to whiskey later on, but one of the reasons you and I are talking is you are a student of Burns.
I am a huge student of Burns.
I've seen you. We did a dinner together. Yeah. You were amazing. I was kind of probably struggling.
You were excellent.
But you love the work of Burns.
Yeah, I do. I'm a tremendous fan of Burns. I love the fact that he is a woven part of Scotland's cultural tapestry. When I do an Immortal Memory, which I do every year, a couple of times a year, I always have a slightly cheeky go at some of the audience when I say, you tell me he's a heaven-taught ploughman. Absolute drivel. He was very, very well read by the standards of the time, massively well read. He was a polymath. He was, had decent French, knew the classics, studied
Well,
philosophy,
young,
theology.
well, young.
Yeah, of course. He died in his 30s, and he was a polymath. And so we have this self-image that he came in from the fields and wiped the dung off his hands and dashed off Tam O'Shanter. It's absolute nonsense. He was an extremely capable and he was an intellectual man. And when he was writing Tam O'Shanter, he was quite deliberately parodying or following the mock epic done by Alexander Pope, the great poetic star of the late 18th century, whom Burns had read and absorbed and hugely admired. He was a genius, not a heaven-taught ploughman. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with heaven-taught ploughmen. Good luck to them. But the guy was not that. He was extremely well read and extremely well educated. And I think it's a little bit of a self-image of Scotland. We like to, we're the rough, tough, down to earth, disdain the culture. I think that image is gone in Scotland, and now we have a cultural renaissance. And Robert Burns, and also, should I say, Sir Walter Scott, should very much be parts of that.
I've said to other people I've interviewed that I've done the toast to the haggis, and it gobsmacked me. I don't mean that. I just found it beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
I found it beautiful. I found
gorgeous.
It was 8 verses of almost perfection. The way he tees up the story, and then describes somebody who's cynical, then comes back to what Scotland wants.
Yeah,
and it is partly the rougher image because Haggis. Yeah.
I think he's doing two things with we now do the toast to the haggis. We pipe it in. They exchange drams afterwards. It's beautifully done. It's a beautiful start to a Burns supper. Burns is doing two things. One, he is praising the common humanity. He's saying that the food of the common man and woman is the one for me, and he's slightly disdaining the posh effete.
Is there the always French ragout
or olio with stouassu or fricassee
with
magaspu with perfect
scunner.
Yeah, looks down with sneer and scorn for view on second dinner. So he's doing that, but he's doing it in a gentle way. That's the other thing. Certainly he is praising common humanity and frankly disdaining the nobility and lampooning them a little bit. But he's doing it in a gentle way. I sometimes see people doing, maybe if they're not acquainted with Burns, they come and they think we must do the toast to the haggis in a deeply serious way and cut her up with an Islay and all this sort of stuff. And it's great. But Burns is taking the mick. He's having fun. It's a joke. It's humorous. It's meant to be satirical. It's meant to be a gentle lampooning of the upper classes and an assertion of the joys of those that Burns would regard as his fellow human beings.
Is there, to an extent, people find it hard to understand because of the language and the words? So. Maybe you and I can go through some of it line by line and explain.
I mean,
can we do that?
There's a line there's a section in Tam O'Shanter, but pleasures are like poppies spread. You seize the flower, its bloom is shed, or like the snow falls in the river. A moment white, then melts forever. He's writing in English, perfectly parsed Augustan English, for about 8 lines. And I think that's deliberate. I think he's saying, if I want to, I can write like Dryden or Pope, perfectly parsed Augustan English. I choose to write in glorious demotic Scots, because that is the language of my people. But it is a choice. It is not because I'm a heaven-taught ploughman and just come in for the fields and wipe the dung off my hands. It's because I choose to exalt the language of my fellow people.
And there is a snobbery around language, isn't there?
There is.
That you've got to speak properly.
There is. I mean, in round about the time this pub was founded, they were probably still trying to drum Scots out of kids in schools. Now you would get an Arts Council grant, but in those days you'd have got a ruler over the wrists if you spoke in Scots. There's a misunderstanding about Scots. There's some still feel it's degraded English, or it's lower class English. It's a different language. It was a different language for centuries, which fell into disuse when the court and the Parliament moved south.
But the language of the toast to the haggis is gorgeous, isn't it? So before you're on a sonsy face, we know what that means. Hello, sonsy. My dad would use the word sonsy.
Sonsy, well fed, well appointed.
Great chieftain of the pudding race, a bun the more you take your place. Pinch, tripe, a therm. They're 3 types of intestine.
3 types of intestine.
Wheel you worthy of a grace's langsman. It's going to be a long poem.
Aye. Yeah.
And then verse 2.
The groaning trencher there, you fill your hurdies like a distant
your hurdies, your bottom.
Yeah. Your pin, that's your smell, would help to mend a mill in time of need. while through your pores the dews distill like amber bead. Now that's kind of slightly nauseating, but wonderful as well. He bear in mind all the time it is lampooning. It is slightly satirical. It is gentle. You know.
His knife, see rustic labour dick. So rustic labour is the serving man who's cleaning the dick. My dad used to use the word dick. And cut you up with ready slick.
I've got it here.
Trenching your gushing entrails bricht like on a ditch. It's agricultural, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just cutting you up like a ditch.
And then there's a dispute about that, because some say warm, reeking, rich. So warm, you understand reeking. That. Reeking, smelling, rich. You know, well done. Mostly people say warm reeking as if it's a combined word. I mostly hear them say, and then what a glorious,
sicht,
and that's the big glorious sicht. Warm reeking, rich.
It's warm.
You can.
What's right?
You can do either. You can do either. Me, I do warm reeking. If I do put the two together, so they're there. It's the heat and the scent together are combining into this rich joy. That's what I think he's doing. But you can do anything you like.
Yeah, and then horn for horn, they stretch and strive. Horn's a spoon, isn't it?
Aye.
Deal tat the hindmost on their drive, so that's it's a race.
It's a race, the devil will get the last one.
Till all their well-swelled kites spill out.
Your belly, yeah.
I remember when I first worked, I thought the Scottish rugby team, the Borders boys would talk about that.
The kites.
Who's got kites? It's amazing language, isn't it?
Oh, it's terrific, yeah. And the one I like, the well-swelled kites alive are bent like drums. Then old good man, that's the head of the table, the old respected Mr. Arrive, you know. We'll not say what that is. And then bethanken hums. And again, bear in mind, it's gentle satire. He's having a little bit of satire with the great man, the great chief of the respected elder, but he's not mocking him. He's really not mocking him. He's bringing him in. He's bringing him into the party, but with a little gentle satire. And then we go on to the one that you mentioned earlier. Is there at our his French ragout? And I would see Burns, who spoke French or understood French, would have said ragout, olio. I think that's Italian, isn't it?
It is. That's it.
There was stawasu or fricassee, also French. Would make a spew a perfect scunner looks down with sneer and scorn for view. Sick at dinner.
So you're looking down with sneering on such
but he's being gentle. He's being gentle. Yeah.
Then it's poor Dale.
But I've got it here.
Siamori's trash.
Poor devil Siamori's trash.
As feckless as a withered rash.
A spindle shank, a gid.
Spindle shank's your leg.
Your legs. A
good whiplash. So your legs as thin as a rope.
Yeah, his knee, his fist, and
the knee's a fist. His fist as small as a nut.
Tiny, yeah. Through bloody flood or field to dash. Oh, how unfit again.
Rubbish.
Then my favourite one. But Mark the Rustic. Haggis fed. Oh, Haggis fed. The trembling earth resounds his tread. Clapping his wally kneve a
big
blade, fist. He'll make it whistle. And legs and arms and heads will sned like taps a thistle, top of the thistle.
So the strong man, who's got the big fist, can grab the nut. It's fantastic.
It's brilliant. It's clever. Language. But again, light humour rather than you know suggesting that's the way all Scotland should be.
And then there's to my mind, the last verse. Is Burns talking about Scotland as feminine?
Yes.
She.
Yes.
Her.
You both will make mankind your care and dishing out your bill of fare. Al Scotland wants nae skinking wear that jaups and luggies.
Well, the jaups and luggies I thought was
is the bowl.
Is the bowl. The luggies the bowl and jaups is sloping around.
Oh, yeah. But if you wish her great for prayer,
Gie her a haggis.
But again, and I mean, Burns wrote a couple of poems. He wrote actually a poem about Whisky called The Author's Earnest Cry and Prayer. He wrote several poems about Whisky, but he wrote the famous one, The Author's Earnest Cry and Prayer, in which he is condemning the way that local distilleries in Scotland are being treated by the Westminster Parliament. He says they're being neglected and overlooked. And he expands that poem, that prayer for Whisky, into a prayer for all of Scotland's traditional cultures and traditional ways of life. And I think he's doing the same, as you say, at the end of To a Haggis. He's doing the same, dare I say it, as Sir Walter Scott did when he defended the Scottish banknotes. If you remember, it was Sir Walter that saved the Scottish banknotes that we still have to this day. Thanks, Sir Walter. It was Sir Walter who found the Scottish crown jewels hidden in the castle. Scott defended the Scottish traditions and artefacts, if you like. Burns very, very much did so, and that's why he wrote in Scots.
Did we not invent the Bank of England?
It was a Scotsman who invented the Bank of England. Yeah, Scotsman established the Bank of England. Scotland invented everything.
Everything.
That's
a different program.
What was the famous book? How Scotland Created the Modern
That's
World?
A different
Absolutely
program.
true. Yeah.
Television, penicillin, hypodermic syringe.
Yeah, telephones.
Yeah.
Football.
Pneumatic tyre. Football.
It's coming home.
There's a program.
Nonsense. There was. BBC did one on
They did.
the origins of football being Scottish. Entirely right.
Yeah,
in this city, I believe, although the Edinburghensians would claim it was an Edinburgh team that were first.
Is that right?
Me, I think it's Dundee United.
Yeah, I know that when your love of Burns, Burns talks about whiskey, am I right, as freedom.
He
where
has
does he say that?
Address to whiskey. I can't remember. Is address to whiskey? There's one. Freedom and whiskey gang together. He says. So, and that is what he's making that point again about. It's in that poem, the Annis Crine Prayer. He is linking the liberty of Scotland and Scotland as a nation with whiskey. He means it more broadly than that. I think he means that the nature of Scotland, the artifacts of Scotland, the cultural icons of Scotland are part of her nature and therefore part of her freedom. So freedom and whiskey gang together, go together.
Have you thought about insuring your brain?
Not sure.
Do you remember all this stuff?
Years and years and years and years of studying. I did it at university.
Did you? All right. But you love it. You love Scots language.
You love Scots
Burns
language. Yeah,
poetry.
but I love contemporary writers as well. You know, the modern Sir Walter Scott would be Irvine Welsh, because he is writing in a demotic, challenging way. Everything's. I'm sorry going about Scott. Everything Scott was terribly posh and he was a Sir. And he was a Tory, and he was probably not a Jacobite. No, he wasn't, because he was in favour of the Union.
He had a very big house.
He had a big house. It's still there. Abbotsford's absolutely glorious. But what he liked was going, trekking the hills of the borders with his gilly. What he liked was defending the issues of Scotland. Now, if you look at a book like The Heart of Midlothian, for example, everybody says, "Oh, Burns, what a toff, what posh." The Heart of Midlothian is written largely in Scots dialect. It's about a woman who faces a working class woman is the main character. Unheard of at the time. You're talking about the early 19th century, just after Richardson and Fielding, and at the same time as Austen and just before the Brontes. A working class woman is the heroine, and she is facing a charge of infanticide. I mean, that's like something out of Trainspotting. And yet we now regard
Silent Witness.
Silent Witness. Silent Witness would be perfect, and we now regard Scott as being too posh and too toffy-nosed to read is wonderful. And Burns was, of course, slightly older, and there's that famous picture of allegedly Scott sitting on the floor as a young boy, admiring this wonderful, gifted Robert Burns. I hope it happened.
But Burns, I mean, I've said before on this podcast, I'll say it again, that Burns, when he died, there was famine in Scotland, wasn't there? There was famine.
It was a terrible, terrible time. It was 1796 he died. 37, I think he was, 36, 37 when he died. It was a dreadful period, and he himself had struggled economically. I said he's not a heaven-taught ploughman, but he certainly tilled the soil. He was a tenant farmer. He was also incredibly, given his love of whiskey, an exciseman, which is quite amusing.
That's quite good, isn't it?
To some, he was a customs and exciseman, and he actually wrote a poem called "The Deals Are Well with the Exciseman," and thinking that's me, But he was part of the land. But the first Burns supper, John, is said to have been about only 5 years, 4 or 5 years after his death, because he was lamented so much, because it was known that a genius had been lost to Scotland. Now, to Scott, they erected that massive monument in Princes Street Gardens. To Burns, there's monuments all over the country, particularly in Ayrshire and also in Dumfries, where he died. But he was lamented hugely. And the Burns suppers have continued, and they've become part of Scottish culture. And I'm glad they've broadened. They were rather too male and
they were, weren't they? Let's dwell on that, because they were male. The toast to the Lassies was a denigration of women.
Well, no, toast to the Lassies was originally a thank you toast to the women who had made the meal, prepared the meal and serve it. It was to the serving.
Then it became a kind of stand-up comedy routine.
Now it's the comedy element. The toast to the Lassies has to be done. I think I find it very difficult to do, and probably try and avoid it. But the toast to the Lassies is meant to be a droll depiction of the battle of the sexes, with a woman giving a very enigmatic, whimsical reply as well. It's a comical joust.
Well, let's go through the Burns.
So that's a change. Yeah.
Let's go through the Burns supper.
Sure.
The Burns supper, traditionally, for people watching not from Scotland or listening, the Burn Supper is a celebration of the ones I've been to.
Yeah.
Very much, they were male. They're now not male.
They're not, no.
Which is
there
great.
are some that are male, but mostly they are not. But mostly they are.
Just describe the average Burn Supper. You do a lot more than I do.
No, they range from mega posh ones in black tie to ones in jeans and comfortable boots. I personally slightly prefer the latter, but I could appreciate the posh ones as well. If the best ones are the ones that have that touch of humour, certainly in the Toast of the Lassies, certainly understanding what the Toast of the Haggis about. The one that I would make exception from that, there should be some humour in it, but the immortal memory to me has to be the immortal memory of Robert Burns. This is the poetic bit. This is the bit about Scottish culture. This is a bit about who we are as Scots. But they ought to be incredibly inclusive. I don't like any that suggests that those who are not from the native-born Scots or not or living in Scotland, whatever. You invite everybody in my view. Burns would certainly have done that. And let's make it inclusive, but let's make it project some things that's distinctively Scottish. I mean, I think the reason that St Andrew's Day has never really taken off in Scotland is we've got Burns Night. We don't need a second one. And I think we're one of the only nations on the planet where one of our largest railway stations is named after Sir Walter Scott's great novel Waverley, and our big celebration is named after our most famous poet.
When you do the immortal memory,
Yes.
what do you cover? How do you do that?
I do. I start with one or two little gags. I try and localize it to the people who are there. I get very quickly into that lesson about the heaven-taught ploughman. Forget that. That's a myth, and it's a dangerous myth. Because if it's true at all that Burns was able to write these poems without any education, then that means anybody can do anything without education. It's denigrating education. And I don't believe that, and I know it's not true with regard to Burns. His wife complained he had a book in his hand all the time and he read throughout every meal. He was constantly reading, and it was heavy stuff. It was anthropology, it was science, it was either he read the Wealth of Nations not long after it was published by Adam Smith. And the guy was a genius. So I get quite into that. Disdain the nonsense about Burns. Bear in mind who the guy actually was. And I also make the second point, which is, yes, he is an icon of Scotland, a glorious icon, a wonderful icon of Scotland. But he's a damn fine poet. He can actually write. Because, I mean, you sometimes get people who are iconic and, McGonagall, for example, is an iconic Dundonian, but not even I would say he's a good poet. Set that to one side. Burns is a genius. He is a poetic genius, a genius of his age, easily up to the standard of as I said, Pope and Dryden, who were the great English stars just before him.
You love it, don't you?
I do.
You love it.
I really do.
You're passionate about it.
I do. And even more about Sir Walter. I know I keep plugging him, but there we go.
Well, no, tell me in the audience about Sir Walter. So we don't know.
No, Scott was, there's a great line. Scott was a published poet. He wrote the Lay of the Last Minstrel, The Lady of the Lake Marmion, and all the famous poems. He was a hugely successful, globally successful poet who then decided to write novels. And novels were very new. You're talking very early 19th century. You only had the sort of the Fielding's Tom Jones and the epistolary novels of Richardson. Before that, they were very dull, they were very dry, they were very Gothic, they were kind of ridiculous. Scott changed all of that. He wrote about history, recent history, and he wrote about the Scottish people, and he wrote about the English people as well, in the likes of the novels that he set south of the border. He wrote about history. He wrote about modern Scotland, or relatively modern Scotland, but he wrote it often in Demotic Scots language, in what you would now call dialect. And I think the guy was a genius. I think it was Jane Austen wrote a letter, the great Jane Austen, the wonderful Jane Austen, whom I admire enormously, wrote a letter to, I think it was either her sister or her brother, saying, Sir Walter Scott has no business writing novels, far less good ones. He's already a famous poet. He should stick to those. I do not intend to like Waverley. I will not like Waverley, but I fear I might. And of course, she'd read it. Really? She'd read it twice, probably. It's brilliant. Byron wrote to Burns, of Scott rather. Sir Walter Scott, wonderful man. I long to get drunk with him, and he went to Abbotsford and carried out that promise.
Wow. So the world that Burns inhabited.
Yeah.
There's no social media. There's no television. No. There's nothing. Knowledge would have been by book.
By book, yeah.
Reading.
and by groups getting together. And he was Burns was initially
talking.
Very much so. Burns was initially tutored at home. His father was very supportive, and his mother very supportive of Burns being tutored at home. And then it was societies, knowledge societies in Ayrshire, debating societies, but also in Edinburgh. Burns spent a fair old while in the capital, and it was debating societies. Also, they were also drinking societies. I mean, they would impart knowledge and impart whiskey at the same time. But that it was a sense of the value of learning and the value of knowledge. Sometimes too highfalutin a sense. But Burns was determined to acquire information and legend. You look at the letters he wrote. He wrote letters to Agnes MacLehose, this fine Edinburgh lady. They corresponded, would you believe, as Sylvander and Clarinda. Sylvander and Clarinda. Now, Sylvander...
Was a wee thing going on.
Sylvander would much rather have been getting up to something else, but Clarinda wouldn't let him. So letters it was, John, reduced to letters. And you read these letters, they are intellectual and erudite to the point of being painful. They are beyond description erudite. Classical quotes... They were showing off to each other. They were showing off to society. Burns could easily hold his own with Clarinda.
You're going through opening up letters. Can you remember that? I mean, goodness me. So back to whiskey then.
Yeah.
I used to, when I did a bit of telly.
Yeah.
I used to come home at night, and the great switch off was having a wee whiskey.
A dram. Yeah.
Do you know? I'd come home after that. You've been on television millions of times. Yeah. It's frying, isn't it? It's frying when you come off. Your brain's fried. And I would have a wee whiskey, and whiskey takes me back to being a wee boy, as I've said to you. It just takes me right back to, you can say to yourself, right, all's fine with the world. Everything's fine. A wee whiskey. I take mine with a bit of ice, which
I've got no objection to that.
But that would make me think, bizarrely, that I'm rooted in a place. It's funny. It's funny being Scottish.
Yeah.
Being Scottish, you're rooted in a place.
But it's Scottish and international. That's the thing. It's Scottish, but it's not a Scottish secret. It's not. We don't hug it to our breast. We defend it fiercely, and we defend it, as I said, legally and also culturally. But of course, particularly, we want to export it. We want to sell it. But it's more than that. We want to share the knowledge and share the experience of all things Scottish. So the Edinburgh Festival is the Edinburgh International Festival. Scotch is an international drink. It can be admired as long as it's known where it comes from, and we protect that knowledge. I think it's part of Scotland. It's part of Scotland.
We're never going home. We're never going home. Can we stay with you in Scotland for the rest of our lives?